Welcome back to The Explainer. I am super excited you're here. Today, we're zooming out. We're going to focus on the macro-level drivers behind offshore field development. We really want to dig into the massive shifts in how we find and produce oil and gas beneath the sea, and why the sheer scale of these projects dictate the incredible engineering we see today. All right, let's jump right in.
Here is a harsh reality that the industry honestly doesn't advertise all that much. The era of giant oil field discoveries, it's largely over. That golden age of massive, easy-to-find oil is behind us. And that single fundamental fact literally changes everything about how we design, fund, and build offshore infrastructure today.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The vanishing elephants, from billions to millions. To truly understand where the offshore industry is sitting today, we have to look at the historical shift in oil field sizes. If you go back to the 1950s, the 60s, and the 70s, geologists were hunting and finding absolute elephants. We're talking massive, game-changing fields with billions of barrels of recoverable oil. Just to put that into perspective, the Ghawar field in Saudi Arabia held a staggering 70 billion barrels. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. Fields like Ghawar, Bergen in Kuwait, and Samotlor in Russia completely defined an era where a single discovery could easily supply the world for years.
Now, contrast those legacy elephants with what we're looking at today. Right now, a really respectable modern offshore development might yield somewhere between 400 and 500 million barrels of recoverable reserves. Fields like Buzzard in the North Sea or the Mars fields in the Gulf of Mexico fall squarely into this category. Now, don't get me wrong, these are incredibly impressive, highly commercially viable finds that absolutely justify their billion-dollar development costs. But when you compare them to those legacy elephants, they're an entirely different, much smaller breed.
But wait, the reality is actually even harsher than that. Many new discoveries aren't even hitting that 400 million mark, not even close. We're frequently talking about just 20 to 70 million barrels. That is a sheer cliff drop in available reserves. And this matters tremendously because it fundamentally alters the math for anyone trying to pull this oil out of the ground. Now, 70 million barrels might still sound like a huge amount of oil to you and me, but let's actually do the math here. A pretty modest offshore production rate of 20,000 barrels per day translates to roughly 7.3 million barrels extracted every single year. So at that rate, your 70 million barrel field is practically depleted in under 10 years. You hit your peak production incredibly fast, and then you are immediately forced to manage a really steep decline phase. So, how do we handle that? Let's move to Section 2, the engineering response, adapting to smaller discoveries.
I mean, think about it. How can the industry possibly justify building a massive billion-dollar standalone platform for a field that's just going to dry up in a decade? Well, they can't. The answer is the subsea tieback. When a field simply doesn't justify its own massive fixed steel structure, a small satellite field on the seabed is tied back via a pipeline to an existing host facility that is already paid for. It is such an elegant engineering and economic solution to this problem of rapidly depleting smaller fields.
Think of the main host platform as a major city's central train station. Building a brand new, multi-million-dollar station for every tiny little town surrounding the city makes absolutely zero economic sense. Instead, what do? You run a railway line from those small towns right into the existing central station. Well, the subsea tieback is that railway line. It routes valuable resources back to a facility that's already perfectly equipped to process them without duplicating all those massive infrastructure costs.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how we actually get there. Section 3, the development decision process, before the steel hits the water.
This entire shift from massive standalone platforms to modular tiebacks forces us to completely rethink how we decide to build in the first place. Before a single pipe is ever laid in the ocean, someone has to systematically decide if a field is actually worth developing. It's a complex process. It starts with Step 1, discovery. Then we move to Step 2, appraisal. That's drilling extra wells to truly figure out the reservoir's actual size. Step 3 is concept selection. Do we use a fixed platform, a floating system, a subsea tieback? Step 4 is FEED, or front-end engineering and design, which is where the heavy, detailed technical work happens. This leads directly to Step 5, the absolutely crucial final investment decision, or FID, where the operator finally commits the big capital. And then, at long last, Step 6, execution.
And you have to remember, these are not quick weekend projects. From that very initial discovery at year 0, moving through all the appraisal and engineering, finally getting that investment decision around year 5, all the way to seeing your first oil, A typical offshore development takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years. Just imagine that for a second. A full decade of continuous massive capital output before a single drop of revenue-generating oil ever reaches the surface. It's wild.
Which brings us to our final key concept. Section 4. Defining the oil. Reserves versus resources.
To justify a decade of immense out-of-pocket spending, you have to be absolutely certain about what is actually down there in the dark. The industry basically categorizes this certainty in 3 ways. First, we have 1P, or proven reserves. These are quantities that can be extracted with reasonable certainty under current economic conditions. Basically, this is your highly bankable oil. Then you have 2P, probable reserves, which carry about a 50% confidence level. And finally, 3P, possible reserves, which are highly speculative. Grasping how these completely different levels of certainty affect billion-dollar project decisions is absolutely essential.
So I'm going to leave you with this highly provocative thought to end on today. When an operator confidently announces to the world that they've found a field with 500 million barrels, on what basis are they actually making that claim? Is it 1P, proven, or is it 3P, possible? Because as you now know, the answer to that question dramatically dictates the economics, and ultimately whether a multi-billion-dollar project lives or dies. Understanding exactly how these technical definitions translate into hard economic reality is exactly what we're going to dive into during our next explainer. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep asking those great questions, and I'll see you next time.